Thank you for joining us. This is our first week of webinars. Our group is e-learning and instructional support. We're on the third floor of the Healy Library. There's a team of instructional designers and graduate assistants and instructional technologists. And mostly what we do is we offer one-on-one consultations to faculty members. We do have training events, workshops, and we've just started offering webinars. And we do offer some technical support that we can talk about later. But the most important thing we do are one-on-one consultations. And those are probably also our favorite thing to do. So you can reach us at the address at the bottom of the screen, elearning@umb.edu. We're always happy to hear from you. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today are assignments. We're going to talk about the basic workflow of assignments, which includes presenting the assignments to your students, how to grade assignments, and how to verify that the assignment configuration you've set up is correct, or at least what you want it to be. We're going to touch on some options that you have when you create assignments. I'm going to show you a bit about how to grade with the iPad mobile app and some basics of the anti-plagiarism software Turnitin. When you present your assignments to students, you have some choices where to put it in your course, but those choices consist of putting it in any content area. Now you can tell a content area in a Blackboard course when you see this menu or this banner across the top of your screen that you're in. And you'll recognize this because you'll see build content, assessments, tools, and partner content. If you see that menu, you're in a content area and you can put an assignment there. If you don't see that, you can't put an assignment there. Examples of content area are weekly sessions, course materials. Those we put in the template if you're designing a course, but you can create your own content areas. So for example, you could create a content area called assignments and put your assignments there. And when you go to create an assignment, you will go to the menu that says assessments and choose assignments. That gives you some choices to how you want to do it. That's how you present them. When you go to grade an assignment, what you do is you go down to the lower part of the course menu under course management. You have to go to needs grading in order to do that, okay? I know this is a review for a lot of you. When you want to verify how you've set up an assignment, what you want to do is you go to student preview, and that's where you create a user who you can use to test how you've created your assignment. The user gets created and shows up in your Grade Center, shows up in your list of users, and here's the naming convention. In my example, I'm an instructor, Gene.Schwab. A user gets created for my use called Gene.Schwab _ preview user. So you'll have a preview user with a name like that you can use to test your assignments or any other type of activity you want to use in Blackboard. However, when you create that user, the first time you click on the student preview button, you'll create that user, but it'll ask you whether you want to save that user or whether you want to delete it, okay? If you want to be using it to test items that you build in Blackboard, you'll want to save it, because otherwise it's going to disappear. And I'll show you all this in a minute when we go and demo in Blackboard, okay? So let me go over to, well, let me mention this so I can show you this in a second. If one thing you want to be able to do is to explain to your students how do they submit assignments. And there's a tutorial in Blackboard that's provided for all of you, so you don't have to create one. And I'll show you where that is in a second. But let me jump over to Blackboard and show you some examples of what I'm talking about. So I mentioned before that you could put an assignment into a weekly session. You could put one into this course materials, or some people like to create a content area called assignments. So for the moment, let's do that. Let's create a content area. I click on the plus sign, and then I click on content area, and I can call something assignments. Okay, I'm not recommending this or not saying it's a good or a bad idea, but I'm just saying that here's an option, okay? And I would bring that up to the top part of the menu, which is where we put menu items that generally have to do with content. And you'll notice if I click on content, I'm going to see one of these menus where it says Build Content Assessments Tools Partner Content. I know I'm in a content area, so that's a place where I can add assignments. But one thing to note is that just because it's called assignments doesn't mean I'm limited to adding assignments. I could actually put content there, but I can add assignments. So to create an assignment, which is easy, I'll just click on assignment. And this time through, I'm just going to make it real simple just to show you the workflow. Okay? Just going to call this one Gene's assignment. Said. I'm not going to do anything here. Make the assignment available, and I'm going to submit. Oh, sorry, I do have to tell it how many points I want. So I'll make this a 10-point assignment. So that's all I actually have to do is give it a name and say how many points it's worth. And that creates an assignment, right? Now, let's say I want to make sure that I've done that correctly. All right, and I know that's correct because it's pretty simple. But this is where you would click on the student preview up here. Now I come over here and I am a student and I'm a student name, remember Gene.Schwab _ preview user. I would just simply click on assignments. I would go here. And in a case like this, I'm not even going to upload something. I might just say, you know, let's say I was going to, let's say my assignment was to find a website, okay? So I could say something like here, and that's it. So I could just submit that assignment. Now you'll notice there's nothing in the submission box because I didn't have any attachment. My whole assignment is over on the right here. It just shows what the user did. Now I can exit preview, and I'm the instructor again, and I'll go to needs grading. Okay, and you'll see at the very end here, I've got a whole bunch of other assignments that have been submitted, but the very last one that says Gene's assignment, and you'll see that the user's named Gene Schwab preview user. I'll go to that to grade it. And that's the entire thing. And I can just simply go in here and say 10 points. And that's, make a comment. That's a great website. Submit. And it disappears off needs grading. If I want to check this out, I can go to the full grade center. And then if you look over here to the right, you see there's the assignment. There's 10 points for that user. If you want to view it as the student, we can go back into student preview. Go to my grades. There's the assignment. And the student can now see that they get 10 points and their feedback is, that's a great website. That's the basics of what there is to an assignment, okay? Everything else is optional, okay? Any questions on that? That's the workflow of you design an assignment, you test it by using the student preview, you then go back and grade it as an instructor. You make sure it shows up in the grade center and then verify that in fact your preview user can see the feedback that you gave them, okay? Everything else is optional. Linda, any questions on that?
There's one, Gene, is there a record of your comments to students?
So in this instance, the feedback was simply what I typed into that box when I put the 10 points in. So the extent of the feedback is this feedback to learner, where I'd say, you know, that's a great website if you look at it right on the right side of the screen. So that's it. You want to be able to make more extensive feedback than that. I'll show you what else there is. Okay. All right. So let me exit the preview. Before I look at the other options, I wanted to remember to show you how a student learns how to submit assignments. So as an instructor, you have more than one tab in Blackboard. You have the My UMass Boston for faculty, but you also have the My UMass Boston for students. If you go to My UMass Boston for students, at the very top, you have these things that are called Blackboard Quick Start videos. And the very first one is submitting an assignment. And if I click on that, you'll see a video that your students can watch and shows them different ways they can access an assignment, how to attach a file to use for an assignment, etc.
There's a question from Sarah.
Yeah.
She's wondering if you can see your feedback to the students later.
Yes, you can always see that the feedback's not going to go away. And if you don't access it from where I would access it from is the Grade Center. Okay, so if I went to the Grade Center and I went into that assignment, there's not a lot of feedback in this particular case, but you can see that in that assignment, where it says feedback to learner, I can still see what they gave them, okay? If there's more feedback, you'll see more, but that's where you find it was within the Grade Center, okay? Just going back to, let's see, that time I put the assignment in a content area created called assignments. If I want to put it in weekly sessions, I could say, oh, here's an assignment for session 1. So I'll click on session 1, go in and add an assignment, and let's look at some of the options that I could do. All right, so we'll just call that more complicated assignment. Okay, so this time I could say, for instructions, I could say see attached and bring up an assignment. I'll just upload a file. It doesn't really matter what it is. Sorry, you cannot see what's happening. Am I sharing this successfully? I can see. Okay, let me just keep going then, if you can deal with those. Okay, so I'm gonna go, instead of having all the instructions on the screen, if it's a somewhat complicated instructions, especially if I want to include pictures in the instructions, I would just go in and upload something. Here, I'm just going to attach my instructions. So that's the first optional thing I can do. I can go in and say a due date for the assignments. So I'll go in and add a due date for the month. Points possible. Now what I'm going to do here is, instead of putting in the points possible, I'm going to add a rubric, okay? Now, a rubric is, I found in my course, because I teach a course, the rubrics are very helpful to students in terms of letting them know what your expectations are for an assignment, especially anything that's at all complex. I found that after I started using rubrics for assignments, my students complained anytime I had an assignment and didn't give them the rubric. They would say, where's the rubric for this assignment? You can reuse a rubric. You can take an existing rubric and edit it to create a new rubric. In fact, I'll show you these options. Where it says add rubric, I can select one that's there. I can create a new one, or I can create one from existing. In this case, I had actually created one. I've got a lot of them here from my course, but I'll just pick this one called College Essay Rubric that I just created for this course. It's from a website called Rubistar, which has a lot of different rubrics that have been contributed from instructors that you can search. So you might want to look at this website, the rubistar4teachers.org, if you're looking for examples there. I just went and searched for college essays, and it gave me this particular rubric. And then on that particular rubric, which I can show you, made it add up to 100 points, and it just says, okay, do you want to use that? Now, this is something to know when you're setting this up in Blackboard. Blackboard defaults to show rubric to students no. I don't know why you would have a rubric and not let the students know ahead of time what the rubric shows. So I always change that to yes. But for some reason, that's the default, is not to show it to them. Okay, I can show you what that rubric looks like in Blackboard by clicking on View Rubric. This is what a Blackboard rubric looks like. Actually, I believe, Linda, I have to share this one separately.
Yes, I think so, because you're sharing a specific thing instead of your desktop, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To go back here. Sorry, this takes a second. Okay, so this is what a rubric looks like in Blackboard, where you assign, you have columns and rows. Columns indicate levels of achievement, rows indicate criteria, and then you assign points to them. And when you go and grade, and I'll show you that Blackboard adds up the number of points that you have for your rubric and uses that as the grade. Okay. Any questions on that? But you can edit them. Okay, so this is just one that I had copied from elsewhere using it. I added the points in Blackboard, and then Blackboard makes it very easy to use. All right, so let me go back to, okay, so I've used the rubric. Other options, and I got to go back to here. Okay, submission details. I can have assignment types. There's an individual submission, which is typically what you're using. There's a group submission. If you want to have, if you've created groups in your course and you want groups, somebody is submitted as a group, the way that works is the first person in the group submits, then nobody else in the group can submit it. And by default, when you grade that submission, everybody gets the same grade. But you can then override it for individuals, okay? So that's how that works. So all I would do down here for group submission is select which groups in the course I want to be, are accountable, let's say, for that assignment, okay? There's another example here of portfolio submission, but we are not at this point using the portfolio tool within Blackboard, okay? So any questions so far on these options? Okay. So next option is number of attempts. There's single, multiple, and unlimited. Probably most people aren't using single, but let me make a case for what I use, which is multiple, okay? And I use multiple, and I usually specify 2, okay? And the reason I do that, and the reason you might want to consider it, is I generally have my students submit once, give them feedback, and let them submit again. So I automatically have a 2, I grade their first draft, and then let them submit again. And if they don't submit a second time, their first attempt is the grade they get. You do have to grade that first one, or they don't get a second chance. Or you might want to use, unlimited, but it's up to you. Anyway, the point is, consider whether you want to use multiple attempts or not. You have that choice. They have the multiple or the unlimited. And if you use multiple, you would have to put a maximum there. And then you specify whether you want to use last graded, highest grade, lowest grade. I'm not sure exactly why you would do an attempt. Well, there must be use cases where you would do an attempt and you'd give them the highest grade, even if the highest grade wasn't the last one. But anyway, plagiarism tools, we're going to look at Turnitin a little while, but this is Blackboard's anti-plagiarism tool, Safe Assignment, which is built in. Okay, so it's a simpler tool to use for anti-plagiarism, but it's somewhat limited. We'll come back to that in a little while when we look at the Turnitin tool. Additional options, grading option. There's a couple options here. You can enable anonymous grading if you want to grade the work without knowing which student you're grading. You might choose to do that. And the other one is delegated grading. And this you might do if, let's say you have a big class and you have so let's say you have teaching assistants and you want to delegate grading to them. And you can use this, either they can all grade all submissions, or you could use this, let's say, to randomize who gets which students to grade, or you could assign people different groups to grade. So that's useful as well, okay? Almost there, display of grades, okay. The most typical options are to do score, or you can do a percentage. But you also have the option to display two different grades, okay, in the same grade column. Right? You also have an option here for whether you want to include this in grading calculations. The reason you might say no is if this is some kind of an assignment you're giving them and you want them to do this. Let's say it's a practice assignment, so you don't want it to be included in the total grade for this semester, but you do want to give them some feedback in terms of what it would be numerically. Okay. Show to students in my grades. This would be something where you don't want them to see what their grade is, or let's say even temporarily you don't want them to see. So you could turn that off and then go back later and turn on to make it visible. Okay. And this last option is to show you some statistics. The almost last thing you can do is to change the availability, which if you don't want to make it available, you could turn this off. But if you make it available, then you can choose display after and display until. And you might turn this on if you don't want it to display immediately. So let's say if you were in the assignments content area and you wanted to set up a number of assignments but not make them visible, not make some of them visible until a certain date, and then make them invisible after another date. So that's where you would use these items. Track number of views is simply something that allows the tracking reports to work for this. So those are pretty much the options that you have for submitting assignments. That's mostly what there is to it. So are there any questions that have come up since we got on this topic? Or is this all really clear?
Bonnie has a question, Jean.
Okay.
Do you want to, it says, can you make the assignment instructions available without allowing them to submit them until a later date?
Yeah, I mean, if you put the assignment instructions in, like I did said here with see attached assignments, or she's saying you want to see the instructions but not make the assignment available. Is that what you're saying? Did I get that right?
She said yes.
Yeah. Okay, so then you'd have to put them as, what I would do in here is, so I'm going to go back here, and I think I just did this whole thing without saving it, right? So let's just say, I'll have to go back. I won't put any options in. I'm going to call this assignment 3, and I'm going to make it worth, I won't redo those options, but like make this worth 10 points. And I'm going to say display after August 31st, right? So if you see this here, you'll see how its item is not available. It'll be available after July 31st. I would go in here and create an item and call it assignment 3 instructions. Sorry. And now we're going to attach something here. Well, let's do this. Oh, okay. So I'm going to go here, browse my computer, throw some instructions in there. Let's see. Okay, and then just say assignment 3 instructions are attached. Assignment 3 will be available on July 31, something like that. And then I put that at the top, and then the students, if you went into student preview right now, and you went into, excuse me, I think we're in weekly sessions 1. Right now, the student could see these instructions here, but they would not yet be able to see the actual assignment. And you would put those instructions in both places. You'd have to do that in order for them to be able to see them. Let's look at needs grading just for a second, because I want to show you if we did an assignment here. Actually, let's go through that one more time for anybody who might have missed it. Let's look at session 13. What I want to do is, I've got an assignment under session 13 called character analysis, and I'll show you how this assignment is set up. And this assignment has a rubric. It's got a due date. It's available. And I'm just going to submit this just to show you something about how you grade an assignment that has an attachment to it. So you can see how the needs grading actually works. Okay, so let's go to student preview. And the student's going to go into weekly sessions, session 13. Okay, going to character analysis. We'll browse the computer, and I'm going to do this one. And the student always says something like, "Professor, here is my paper." Okay, they submit it. And what you'll see is that the student will see a preview of their submission. Shouldn't take too long. Not that it's necessary to see that, so let's not. Let's go back to being the instructor. So I'll go to needs grading, and you'll see right at the bottom here is that character analysis and the preview user. So I'll go there, and here you can see, okay, here's where you'll see the submission. Okay? Now notice that I've got this preview here. This student preview, the preview of the assignment like this is only going to show up when there's an attachment. So if the student typed the paper into the text box that's in the assignment, there won't be this online display of the paper. Okay? So it's important, if you want to have this online display for grading, that you tell your students that they have to submit as an attachment, which could be a Word document or a PDF document. Okay? Now to grade this, there's a couple things here. Okay, one, I got this college essay rubric. So that rubric I showed you before, it's a pop-up, so you really can't see it. But so what I'm just going to do is, actually, let's see, can I do that? Well, I'm going to put the points in. Let's see. Actually, let's see if there's another. Oh yeah, there's two ways to do that. This is the way you can see the rubric in Blackboard Collaborate. I think you can see that now. And I'm just going to go down and check off which points I want to give the student on the rubric. All right, that saves the rubric. All right, that gives them 80 points. And I can just simply say here, see rubric for detail of points. Right? And then I'll go over here and I can actually make some comments here, right? And I could put a comment, point comment I can just put something here and make something, yes, they are influential. So that will show up. I can highlight an area if I want. Okay. I can recommend that to strike out areas. So I can do a lot of commenting here, different colors. So this is all online. So I don't actually have to, let's say, download a paper, make changes on it, upload or anything like that. I can do all of that here. And then when I'm done with that, I can submit it. Okay. And then I could go on and grade the next person, right? So that's kind of the workflow for a paper that somebody has submitted, let's say in Word. Okay. So are there any questions on that? All right. So now I'm going to try and do something else. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to show you is the Blackboard iPad app for grading, right? This is just runs on iPad and just runs grading, but this is a really nice thing to use when you want to work on an iPad, but it actually has one capability that only works in this app that doesn't even exist in the desktop application that I kind of like. So that's the reason I'm showing it to you. So I'm just going to bring up my iPad. Okay, I think you can see that.
Yes, we can
and
see
I'm
it.
going to go into Blackboard Grader. All right, and you go into Blackboard Grader and you type UMass. And I'll choose UMass there, and I'll sign in. Hopefully I did that fast enough that you didn't read it. Okay, and then it's going to give me a list of courses at the top. And I'll go and find the course that we're in. And it gives me a list of assignments. And then the to-do one should give me a list just the assignments that still need grading. And I wanted to do the character analysis, not the one I just graded, but there should be somebody else. And it shows me the ones that have been, you'll notice there's one that hasn't been graded at the top. And then there's the one I just graded where they got an 80. And then the one below that is somebody who got a 95. And then below that, it lists all the students who have not yet submitted the assignment, who are enrolled in the course. But I'm going to grade the one at the top that says Amy Mary U, or Amy Marie. So I'll bring up her assignment, and you can see here's the paper that she wrote. And I have a little bit less, somewhat limited tools here. In terms of commenting, I can click the button up there, and then it just says tap to comment, and I can tap on the screen somewhere else, and then I can go in here and just make a text comment. Okay, so I'll put that there. But then this section over here for grading, and again, I can use the rubric, pick out, good, good, excellent, good. I've got the rubric done, so I've got a 65, but then the thing I can do, which is kind of cool at the bottom, is that I can leave, let's get out of the rubric. How do we get out of the rubric? At the bottom, you can see it says audio and video. And I'm not partial to leaving video comments, which is actually something you can do in the desktop app. But audio comments, I think, could be very useful. If you click on audio, I can then click this, say, not a bad paper, but I think you should really try a little bit harder and then resubmit this paper. Okay, I'm really counting on you. And then I'll click stop and say use audio. Okay, now, and then send grade. And it says that's been sent to the grade center. Now, if I go back to, okay, now we're back here in the instructor course. I do know, there's something else I want to show you, so I don't have time to show you this, but I know that when I logged in as the other student, I was able to listen to the feedback. I wasn't doing this as the student preview user, but I do know that that voice thing worked very nicely. They get an MP4 on that side and they can listen to your comments. I'm not going to do that right now because I did promise to show you a little bit of Turnitin so that you would know how that worked. So let me quickly go over that, okay? I've actually put some examples of Turnitin here. A couple things about Turnitin, or the main, I should point out the main thing to point out about Turnitin is that Turnitin has an advantage over the built-in Safe Assign in that it's got a much broader set of, in the repository that it compares a paper against. It's a much bigger database of student papers and online sites that it compares the students' work with, much bigger than Safe Assign. One thing to remember though about Turnitin is it's always better to try and deter plagiarism than it is to try and catch people. So when you set up a Turnitin assignment, the first thing you do is to set up options that the student can use to submit their paper. And they find out that, oh, I haven't done this right. I've copied things that I should have cited. I should try and express things in my own words. So when you set it up, I'll show you the options that I used in a Turnitin assignment and just show you what I mean by that. So a Turnitin assignment is, again, in a content area, and instead of choosing assignment, you choose Turnitin direct assignment. Okay, and I'll just show you the options that I chose when I created this particular assignment. I'm referring to this as the student assignment. Okay, so I just give it a name. Options for submission method are file upload or text submission. I'll just, in this case, say I'm requiring a file upload. Again, kind of for the same reason as the other assignment, I want something that I'm able to mark up, okay? Overall grade, again, whatever you want. Now, exclusions in Turnitin have to do with, do you want to exclude certain matches that you don't really consider to be an issue as far as plagiarism. And one of them is, if there's a small match, do I want to bother with it? So if 10% of the material appears to be copied from someplace, do I really care? So you can set, a certain percentage of material. If it falls below, don't worry about that. There's a grammar checker in there. The next section is kind of important because if a student is submitting this, what you want to do is say, don't put the student paper in a repository because they're just testing to find out, if there are any issues with their paper. And at that point, you don't want their paper to end up in the repository, for other people to compare it against. So you'd say no repository, okay? You do want to check against student papers, you do want to check against the internet, and you do want to check against journals and publications. Right? Reveal grades immediately. You're not really interested in grades at this point. If you have the student doing it, ignore the Turnitin grades. You don't use Grademark. Grademark is Turnitin's put something on the screen for the instructor to do. Report generation speed has to do with, yes, I want to be able to submit it more than once. Okay, they can submit it. If there's a problem, they can revise it and submit it again. Not using Blackboard groups. Actually, we don't care about the grading schema because we're not really grading it at this point. And students can view originality reports. And late submissions, doesn't really matter at this point, okay? So that's kind of the basics for a Turnitin assignment that's going to be used by a student, okay, in order to submit. One thing to know about a Turnitin, another thing is that student preview is not compatible with Turnitin, okay? So in order for me, if I wanted to go through this, but I don't have the time, I would have to go to another user, which would mean I'd have to log out or I have to go to another browser. We don't have time for that, but let me show you what this looks like after a student has submitted and what you get back, okay? So if I go to the submission inbox for this, you're gonna see, okay, my life. So Demo Schwab, which is not the student preview, submitted this, and you may recognize this paper, okay? So I just thought I'd submit this thing to see if there's any plagiarism here. So now Grademark is a tool here which allows the instructor, let's say that this has been submitted and they've cleared up all the plagiarism, and the instructor can do things like pick some sort of common things, like if there's a citation needed, the instructor could put that, let's say, wherever they want, said, oh, you need a citation here. And then the student will get instructions as to where to go to read about citations. So these are sort of some common comments you can make. Weak transition, I can put that in here. You can do the same thing as you did with a regular, assignment where you can put comments, things like that. But it gives you some other additional things you can do, okay? Originality, that's where you get these originality reports. And if I click on that, it tells us that 53% of this thing here is considered plagiarism. And in this case here, 40%. And then it actually will give you the sources on the internet. The first one it comes up with is the Jerusalem Post. And it'll tell you if you go there. It turns out that all this is really giving me, skip this thing here. It actually brings me to, in this case, it brings me to some news sites that tells me about, the plagiarism that we have here. So I didn't give you a real example of something, and I didn't want to put it into the database, but just to give you an idea. And what I would say as far as Turnitin, there's a couple places to turn to get more information on that. One of them is our how-to wiki, which is how-to.wikispaces.umb.edu, where we have a number of resources on a number of the items we support, including Turnitin. If you go there, you can read a lot about how to use Turnitin. The other thing, as I mentioned before, is to make an appointment with us for a consultation, and we'll help you more with that. We haven't announced a webinar yet on Turnitin, but I imagine we'll have something soon. Just to point out a little about, make sure you know how to get help from us. 24/7 support, which is not, but is very helpful, is the umb.echelp.org. Password issues, always remember to go to the IT service desk because they handle password. But again, instructional design, e-learning at umb.edu. And if you really work with any of these tools and you have questions about it, always write us. And somebody's always happy to meet with you in person or online to help serve your needs and your students' needs. If anybody has comments on the webinar or thinks that there are some other things that they'd like us to address in this format, please, again, send email to elearning@umb.edu. And if there's nothing else, thank you very much for your attending, and we look forward to seeing you soon.